Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at game number 6 of the 2024 World Chess Championship match being played between Liren from China and Gukesh from India. Now, the match has been pretty topsy-turvy. We've had a lot of exciting games and also some games that feel like they've ended prematurely. At any rate, Game 6 has historically been a very important game in World Championship matches. In two of the most famous matches that have been played, Game 6 has been decisive when the match has been level at 2.5 each. The first one, of course, is a famous match played in 1972 between the first American world champion Robert James Fischer and Boris Spassky, but also in 2021 in the match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi, with a match tied 2.5. Magnus won an epic endgame in game number 6, winning with a rook and a knight versus a queen, one of the best games that you will ever see. And so based off of our history, will game 6 of this match also be pretty similar with the score being tied up, or will we get another boring draw? Well, let's find out. So we have Liren playing with the white pieces, and he starts out with the move d4. Now, one thing that's very unusual about this match is it feels like all the games where Gukesh has had the white pieces have been very dynamic, whereas Ding with the white pieces has been anything but dynamic, and the games really have not been very exciting. So we get d4, knight to f6 is played, and now we get to move bishop f4. Now, this is a classic London system being played by Ding here. It's something that he has played before. It's not really common in world championship matches, but it has become a very topical opening amongst amateur players, but also at the elite level. Many players, including the 5-time world champion Magnus Carlsen, have essayed this opening. So we get d5. Now we have e3, and here Gukesh plays the move e6. Now, this is the first moment where there are some options here. Gukesh could play the move bishop to f5, trying to play a position like c4 and e6, where now the bishop is developed outside of the pawn chain. Very similar to the white bishop on f4. Both bishops are spying the long diagonal. So we get e6. Now we have knight to f3, c5 played by Gukesh, and here we get the move c3. Now, Ding could have played knight bd2. This is also a move that Magnus has played himself, but we get c3. Now Gukesh plays bishop d6, and here we get this move bishop to b5 check. Now, when we do videos for amateur players, generally what I would recommend here is playing the move bishop to g3, offering the trade of the bishop so that you can capture towards the center, open the H file, but much more importantly, you want to put this bishop on d3 where you have a nice wooden shield spying all of the diagonals. So in this game, instead, we get the move bishop b5, and the reasoning is that if you play the move bishop to g3 here, black can play queen c7, and let's just say you go knight bd2. Now after knight b to d7 here, black is going to play for the move e5, building the big black center, and if we get this position with takes, white is still okay here, but black has a little bit more of a grip and control in the middle of the board. So we get the move bishop to b5. Now we have knight c6, takes, and now we get the move takes, and the move queen a4. Now this is all pretty standard theory so far between the players. Gukesh castles, and now we get the move queen a3. Here Gukesh plays knight to e4, a logical move, guarding the pawn on c5, but also protecting the queen on d6 as well. So we get knight up d2, and now we have this move e5 being played. It's very clear here that Gukesh has come into this game extremely well prepared, but on top of that, this is still modern day theory. This position has been played between Levon Aronian and Lenier Dominguez. So we get chop, we get chop, and now we have the move queen g6 being played here by Gukesh. Now temporarily, white is up a pawn in the middle of the board, but white is way behind in development. The rook, the knight, the rook, and the king are all on their original squares. So now we get the move knight to d2. If Ding were to castle here, it's spaghetti-o time, as there is bishop to h3 here, attacking the pawn on g2. And if you play the move g3, black simply chops the rook, and now black simply has an extra rook for a knight and should go on to win the game. If you don't play g3, you're simply getting checkmated by the classic lolly mate or lobster pincer with the bishop and the queen. So we get knight to d2. Gukesh captures, we get castles, queen takes f2, and now we have this move pawn takes pawn. Now this is the first original move. Rook d to e1 was played in that game I mentioned before between Dominguez and Aronian, but Ding is prepared and he takes with the pawn. Now, one thing that I like about this opening from Ding is that even if the computer says it's completely equal here, this is a very tricky position. If your opponent is not super prepared here from the black side, you can get into trouble very, very quickly because you have 3 pawn islands. All 3 of these juicers are very, very weak, and if you're not super precise, bad things can happen. And on top of that, remember, we are not computers. We are all human at the end of the day. And so expecting perfect play is not reality. So we get rook to b8. Now Ding plays knight c4. He is still moving instantly. If you were to go for knight takes pawn, it's spaghetti-o time. Queen takes b2 is checkmate, and you lose the game immediately. So we get knight to c4. Now Gukesh plays bishop to e6, and this is the first moment where Gukesh is out of his preparation. Mind you, we're already on move number 17, so it's not a huge surprise, I would say, that the players are out of preparation here. But that being said, in this position, black could force a draw here with a very unusual move, queen to g2, and the reason is the queen becomes like a magnet spying the rooks on g1 or f1 in the coming moves, as you'll see, because after rook g1 you take here, rook h1 you simply go back, so the queen becomes a big magnet here targeting the rook. And if you play a move like rook g1 takes, rook h1, queen e2, rook e1, queen f2, now the queen is spying this rook, and long term white has nothing better to do than simply force a draw by repetition. Now, as I mentioned in my recap yesterday, this is really the difference defining whether you've played a great game or a not so great game, and how theory plays such a huge role in modern day chess, from the standpoint that if Gukesh knows to play either queen g2 or queen f3 spying the rook on h1, he will draw this game instantly. We'll have a 1 hour game. Everyone will be super critical of Ding, saying his preparation is terrible, he should do something different. But if Gukesh does not know it, there's a very good chance that Ding will get chances to potentially have an advantage and win the game. So the pendulum swing between the memorization and how deep you know the line really makes a difference between what could be a very exciting game and simply a very boring draw. So we get the move bishop e6 instead. This move also very logical, probably I would say frankly much more human than the other moves, especially without knowing the concept of queen g2 or queen f3, as you spy the knight on c4, which guards the pawn on b2, stopping the checkmate. You move the knight, checkmate once again, GG, why not? So here we get the move rook to d2. Now Gukesh plays move queen to f3, we get rook to e1, and after a long think we get bishop takes knight. Now this is a very important move here, because if you don't capture the knight on c4, the knight has many jumps. You have a knight to d6, you also have a jump to a5, and all your pawns are very weak here, and frankly the white king is very safe on the queen side. So we get takes, and now Gukesh plays move queen to f5, and this is probably the first critical moment of the game. Now the computer here wants us to move rook b to d8 and says this position is a dead draw here. Once again, if Gukesh were blitzing the moves, he would know this is right. Without knowing, this move is very hard to play for two reasons. First reason is that white can play rook d6, creating a bastion here with the rook guarded by the pawn. If you ever trade, now I'm pushing p, I have a pawn that's running up the board in a hurry, and white is a little bit better. Secondarily is that white can also trade the rooks and play the move e6 here, and after takes queen f7, takes, you don't take on c6 by the way, because of queen takes a2, suddenly your king is a little bit loose. But after queen takes f7 here, takes, rook f1, king e6, rook f4, king e5, rook f7, rook d3. Black is drawing in this position after say takes, rook h7, where you go rook d3, but you are going to be down a couple of pawns here, and without knowing that this is equal, white has the wide peepos, white is pushing pawns on both sides of the board, and you simply cannot calculate this. So without knowing that this is a draw, without knowing the computer evaluation, there is never a world you can go into this endgame. So we get the move queen to f5, and this is the first mistake in the game. And at this point, let's take stock of what's happening. Now here, Gukesh is down nearly 50 minutes on the clock. They're on move number 20, meaning that Ding has a big time advantage, a much easier position to play, and it's looking like there is an opportunity here for Ding to really capitalize and shock the world. Now here, Ding inexplicably spends 43 minutes before playing this move queen takes c6, and in my opinion this is simply not acceptable. I don't care what your name is, your name could be Magnus Carlsen. This is not how you use your time. This is simply a huge sin in my book to do this in this situation. And the reason for that is that Gukesh has to know that in this position he is a little bit worse here. He's way down on time. The biggest weakness that Gukesh has is he's a calculator more than an intuitive player, meaning that in rapid and blitz he sometimes will make mistakes when he gets low on time, as we saw in the Candace, but also in this match in game number 1. So if we had someone like Magnus or Jan Nepomniachtchi playing here, I'm pretty confident they would have played this move in literally 10 seconds, and after queen takes e5, they would go into the tank. But instead, Ding squanders all of his time advantage here on this move, which is just not okay. I was really screaming during my live stream for takes, queen d5, queen e7, and this is the game, of course, and rook d1 being played in literally 1 minute instead of Ding using 50 minutes on these moves. Now, you're probably also wondering, actually, rook d1 wasn't played, sorry, up to this point where rook d1 should be played. You're probably wondering, why do I say white is better? Now, the reason that white is better here is pretty straightforward. In an endgame, white has this 3 versus 1 pawn majority, meaning that if queens ever come off the board, you simply start pushing your p up the board very, very quickly. But on top of that, you'll notice that you have a legendary triple stack here with the queen and the 2 rooks. But also, there is only one completely open file here, that being the d file, which is easily the most important file. Now, the reason is that you do have a C file and an E file and a B file, which are all kind of half open, but the D file is really, really important here because if white can set up a kebab with rook to D7, now you hit the pawns, the queen is targeting the pawn, queen targets E4. This is very, very hard to defend for black. So at this point, I was expecting rookie d1, and I will also give my first really hot take during this recap, which is that I believe that after rookie d1, and I'm confident this would happen in a game if he were to play it, Magnus Carlsen, I think, would beat anybody in the world from this position with the white pieces here. I don't think anybody could save this. Not Fabiano, not me, not Nepo. I think Magnus would win this game in classical chess basically 90% or more of the time against the best players in the world. Instead, we now get the move queen d6 from Ding. Now, those of you guys who are watching my live stream, you probably would have noticed I started to do a live recap when I saw this move being played, because already here I could see the body language of Ding, and it felt like he was uncomfortable. He didn't actually think he was better, which to me is simply inexplicable. I can't explain it in any way, shape, or form. But he plays queen d6, and now I got the sense that he wanted to force a draw. So I started to do a recap, but then the game would go on. We would not get a repetition, as you will see. Now, what is my explanation for this? My explanation for this, there really isn't one, is that I think Ding is just happy to draw the games, and he's not actually super serious or trying very hard. Because if you have any general view of this position, only white can be better here. Only white can be better with the 3-on-1 combined with the control of the open file. But Ding decides to play queen d6. You get here, queen e7, queen d6, and now Ding is offering a draw here, sort of just out of the blue. We're not even 2 hours into the game here, and it feels like everything is about to end, and everybody's going to be in an uproar over this game ending so prematurely. However, here we get the move after queen d5, queen h4 being played by Gukesh. He rejects the draw here. He decides to follow the classic Latin phrase, of course, which is it's Fortis Fortuna Juvat. I forgot the exact sequence, but Fortis Fortuna Juvat, which means, of course, fortune favors the bold, and Gukesh showing great bravery here, trying to go for more. Now, this is a very risky decision here because after rookie d1, white is better, as you can tell from the valuation bar. But Gukesh here is playing the long-term psychological game as well, whereas he can see the body language. He can see that Ding is uncomfortable, and he's trying to take advantage of that, even if the objective evaluation of the position is not in his favor. Additionally, I would add that also here from the standpoint of Gukesh, this is a little bit worrying too, in that I get the sense that he's becoming a little bit overconfident. He's sort of over-evaluating his position, or misevaluating it, you could say, and he's thinking that he's always better when in reality he's not. I'm sure we'll hear in the press conference what he thought at this point, but at any rate, the game goes on. So now we get g6 being played here by Gukesh, creating a little bit of lift for the king, but also supporting f5 down the road to create the classic connect fort. Now we get the move queen to e5. We have rook b to e8, queen g3, and now Gukesh plays queen h5. Now, one thing that's very difficult in this position, especially since you can't calculate, is you have to trust your intuition in all these endgames to decide whether you're okay or not. And frankly, with white having 2 connected pass pawns rushing up the board, it's very understandable that Gukesh did not go into this endgame here after rook e5, c4, and rook g5. Black's apparently okay, but frankly, without knowing this is okay, you can see this position and think, after takes rook c2, the pawns are just rushing up the board here. I'm in a lot of trouble. My pawns are too slow, and if white gets a pawn to the end of the board, white wins the game immediately. So after queen g3, we get queen to h5 from Gukesh. Ding plays queen f4, and now we get queen a5. Now, this is a move the computer doesn't love, but frankly, at this point in the game, it's very clear that Ding is in the driver's seat here. He controls the open file. He is a very well-placed queen. He can create the kebab on d7. You can try to push the pawns, and Gukesh will have to be very accurate to ensure the draw. So now we get queen to a5. Now we have a3 here from Ding guarding the pawn. We get queen b5, and now we have rook d4. Here Ding is threatening to win the pawn, but more importantly there's also rook b4. So if black goes here, you have rook b4 attacking the queen and the rook while creating the classic 90-degree right triangle. So we get queen e2. Rook d2 is played, we get queen to f3, and now Ding plays the move king c2. Now this is the second time in the game where Ding shows zero respect for the clock, and understanding that the clock is a very integral part of the game, especially when you're playing without increment in the first time control. When we look at this position after queen f3, Ding is once again up 13 minutes. We're on move 33, 7 moves to go. Mind you, it's not hard to make these moves for Gukesh, but you're up 11 minutes on the clock, and now he spends 11 minutes playing the move king c2. Again, completely inexplicable time usage from Ding for pretty much like the 5th time in 6 games here, in my opinion. Here what he should have played was this move c4, not only because it's a very explosive move, but you need to start pushing your p on the queen side if you want to have any chance at winning the game. Instead we get king c2, a very quiet, very timid and safe move, and here Gukesh decides to trade the queens and play f5, creating of course the classic connect 4. Now as we were playing chess and not connect 4 doesn't end the game instantly, unfortunately for Gukesh and all the Indian fans. But that being said, here it's a very tricky situation, because if black is able to sack a pawn and play f4, suddenly you have the 2 rooks behind the 2 connected passed pawns, and these pawns are going down the board immediately. You're pushing your p, and black will win the game in a hurry. So here we get the move h4, trying to stop g5, and now we get the move e3 being played by Gukesh. Now this is a move that is a mistake. Gukesh uses 5 minutes before playing it. If we'd seen the move king to g7, it's anybody's guess what would happen, and the reason is actually very sneaky. Now it's obvious why h4 was played. It was to stop g5 with the pawn sack to create the passed pawns, but black can now use the king as an active piece here, and really the only way for white to not end up worse here is to go king d1 followed by king e2 and king e3 to blockade these pawns. Would Ding have found it? Anybody's guess. If you don't do that, say you play a move like rook d7, king h6, and now c4, here black can play e3, rook e2, rook e4, and after king to d3, black can take on f4, take on h4, and now black has 3 connected pawns going up the board. Maybe still a draw with correct play, but if anybody can win, it will be black. So we get h4, and Gukesh regrettably plays the move e3 instead of going for this nice king maneuver to sneak the king up the board. And at this point, now Gukesh has no chance to ever win again, and it's only a question of whether Ding will want to play for more, or will he be happy with a draw. So we get rook to e2. Now we have rook to e7, and here Ding plays move king d3, and this is the last moment where Ding had the chance to try and play for more. Once again, he had the option to go for the explosion with c4 here, trying to push his p on the queen side, and after king g7 here, white can go c5, king h6, and once again there's a very strange maneuver with king d1, where after king to h5, now you can play rook e1, king h4, king e2, blockading the pawn, and now you simply have a free hand to start pushing your p up on the queen side of the board. Ding instead goes for king d3, which frankly is a much more human approach here, bringing the king towards the center to attack the pawn. But now after rook to e8, you no longer have the idea of moving the rook and trying to blockade the king here, because if you move the rook to e1, I will push p with e2 and create ideas like rook to e3 combined with king g7, h6, h5, and now there's no way to blockade the pawn. So here we get the move h5 being played by Ding, and now Gukesh takes the pawn. Here we get rook to d5, we have h4, rook takes f5 here, and now we get the move rook d7 check. Now it's very important to note here that h5 is a very solid move, because after king g7 takes, now the king struggles to sneak up the king side. If you go king h6, I can just check you and go back. So with the h pawns off the board, now the ideas with g5 or running the king simply become less effective. So we get rook d5, h4 takes, and now we have rook d7 check being played. Important move, by the way, because if black goes king g7, now white can play the move rook to e5, and after takes, if black trades, he loses the game as the king gets over to stop the juicers, and with a 3v1 on the queen side, you win the game. So king g7 would be a mistake, which is why Gukesh plays check first, king c2, and now he goes for the move king to g7. Now here you're probably thinking, well, why not rook e5? Just do the same thing and win the game. But if you play rook e5, black can trade the towers and play rook to d2, checking the king, and after takes, h3, you're one move too slow, you go to e2, h2, f2, I get the queen, I win the game, and you lose in a very embarrassing fashion. So it's kind of sad that you can't play rook e5 here, but instead Ding plays the move rook to g2 check, and now we get king h8, not king h6 by the way, because after check king h5 there's rook g5, which simply checkmates the king on the edge of the board. So we get king to h8 being played, and now Ding plays rook to e2 here. We get king g7, rook g2, king h8, and now after rook e2, not rook f2, sorry, now after rook to e2 and king g7, the game ends by a threefold repetition, and the players split the half point. So what to make of this game overall? Now for me, this game was a very strange game, hard to understand, because on the one hand I felt like Ding had a nice position out of the opening, up on the clock, easy position to play. He squanders a time advantage and then wants to make a draw. Gukesh declines and plays on. Very hard to judge. I don't really understand this game, because it feels to me like, even though positionally Ding was better for much of the game, it feels like Gukesh was the one trying to win the game. So really just strange all around, very hard to understand the psychology behind this game. I think that what I would say is, for Gukesh, this has to be a big boost, because he played something dubious, he took the risk, and Ding still was happy to make a draw in spite of that when he had the white pieces. So I think for Gukesh, he has to be pretty satisfied. This should build upon the confidence he already has. He does need to be a little bit careful in terms of being too overconfident when it comes like over evaluating his position or thinking he's better when he's not. But at any rate, I think this has to be a plus. Now for Ding, on the other hand, I simply don't know what his strategy is in this match. I'm getting the sense that for Ding, he simply is hoping to be able to hold Gukesh and keep the match level through the regulation portion of classical chess, and then get to a rapid tiebreaker and win. That's really the only explanation I have for this, because frankly, being up 40 minutes on the clock in a position with no risk, where he should have an advantage due to the pawn structure, and not trying to win, to me that just signifies that he's just not trying very hard, and he's simply hoping to get through the classical to rapid. So the generally from a psychological standpoint, I would say that all the trumps currently point to an advantage for Gukesh. Whether he can capitalize or not is a different story, but I would be feeling very confident if I were an Indian fan right now. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the 6th game of the 2024 World Chess Championship being played in Singapore. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap after game number 7. Tomorrow is a rest day, so we'll cover some other stuff, but we'll be back with a recap on Tuesday after game number 7. Match remains tied, so it should be pretty tense, but we'll see what happens, and that's going to be that. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon. Have a good one. Bye.